Challenger, 7 people killed. Burn through on the solid rocket booster. A number of burn throughs had happened on previous missions. But nothing had exploded last time, so probably won't explode this time. Columbia in 2002, or 3, I think. 3. Multiple launches have had foam coming off of the external tank, which was using a much weaker glue, but was an environmentally friendly glue, so that's the main thing. So they've had foam hitting the orbiter before, and hadn't caused any problems before, so it's probably not going to cause any problems now. This kind of thing with flying with known defects is I think it's unforgivable. I mean, I really do find it unforgivable. I don't know how many flights I've actually taken, but I do know I've got just under 1,000 hours. I got 983 hours or something. And I've had 3 engine failures during that time and a couple of other emergencies and stuff. But there's only one flight out of those thousands of flights that I took where I was really scared. And I was scared the entire time because it was the one time I took off with a known defect because the pressure on me having to have that airplane at an airport was so high that I felt like I couldn't. There was no alternative to it but to put it on a truck and send it there. I just couldn't do it. I was flying a Velocity, and this thing I had to pull that airplane off a runway 5 times, and we were in Gillespie, and the landing gear crunched again. So I let it go into a repair shop there. I was afraid of this airplane by this point, and I didn't want to make this last flight at all. And as they're wheeling the plane out to me, the battery, big old car battery, falls out of the nose wheel, just hanging there by the cables, by the landing, by the nose wheel doors, which close in flight. Now, if that battery had come out in flight, it's not a question of me losing electrical power. If that had happened, I'd just glide the thing in, no big deal. But since that battery was so heavy and so far forward, if that battery had departed the airplane while I was flying it, I would have been so far out of CG, I would have been so tail heavy. Velocity XLRG. I would have been so tail heavy that there would have been no place to. The plane would not have been recoverable. That would have been it. And I saw this, and I just, that I've made several decisions that I've regretted in aviation, but I never ever was scared up there except for this flight, and I was scared every second of that flight. I remember calling a friend of mine who had flown with me in this airplane a bunch and talked about this. And oh, by the way, I'm on the takeoff roll. We're 3 or 4 seconds into full power, and then bang! Some kind of thing from the engine. So I immediately cut the power, abort the takeoff, and pull over to the side. And some kind of a backfire. Ran the engine for like 20 minutes, half an hour, something like that. And I just decided to do it because I had been, my friend's father had bought it and bought it to let me fly it everywhere, and it had to be sold, and I just did it. So after the thing has the kind of backfire on the takeoff roll, I'm getting ready to go back and try again for the takeoff, and before I did that, I called my friend, and I said, can you, if I have any trouble here, could you watch out, could you take care of my cats for me? And what I was really doing, I realized after the fact, was I was looking for somebody to tell me not to fly the plane. I was looking for somebody to tell me, Bill, do not fly that airplane. But I didn't get that. Where's the audio? You guys getting audio? Audio? I'm not seeing any audio. Let me just check. Yeah, it's there. I'm not getting any levels, though. I should have rebooted this computer. So, anyway, yeah, that was the only time I've ever been scared. And I was so scared that I, I didn't illegally enter airspace twice, but I missed 2 calls. I missed 2 air traffic control calls to me. None of them were dangerous or anything, but you should never have to call a pilot twice, and that happened to me twice. You know, ask you a question, give you instructions, you don't read it back, and then they ask you again, and it was a nightmare. And when I landed, I said, I'm never flying this thing again. But I should not have made that flight, but I did, and since I survived it, I learned a big lesson from that. So, you know, God in His mercy, they say that when you start flying, God gives you a gigantic bag of luck, and every time you fly an airplane, you take some of that luck out of the bag and put it into a bag called experience, and you hope that the bag called experience is big enough so that when you run out of luck, you're not necessarily gonna buy the farm. Another little detail of that I got to throw in the Apollo thing. Buy the farm. What happened to the guy? Oh, he bought the farm. It means he crashed. And the term comes from the fact that a lot of this early flying was done in barnstorming days, out in a field just outside of a small town, and a guy would fly low over the town trailing a banner, and he'd land out on a field someplace, and he'd give rides for like $1 or $5 or whatever the case. And so over time, there were enough of these crashes where the guy basically crashed in a cornfield, ruined the guy's crops. So after he was gone, the estate did the right thing, and they bought the farm. They ruined the farm, they burned it to the ground, so then they bought the farm. Just bought it. You bought the farm. And it's a much better way of speaking than, oh, what happened to Jim? Oh, he died in a fire explosion. You can't function like that. It's not lack of emotion. It's the exact opposite of that. It is the mental discipline to keep emotion out of issues where emotion will hurt you. And one of these things I said somewhere in this Apollo 11 thing was I basically said, emotion will kill you. Having an emotional reaction at that time, at an emergency time like that, will almost certainly kill you. During each one of the 4 hours, I keep going back to Apollo 11. So I spend the first 20 or 30 minutes on it with the landing. And then I go back to them on the moon in part 2. I go back to them getting ready to walk on the moon in part 3. And then part 4 is the actual moonwalk and all the rest of it. But I don't even remember if it survived the cut. But the Apollo one, and I'm not going to say any more words about the Velocity XLRG. It was actually constructed at the factory, and we had a good inspection of it. But they kept adding weight to that airplane, more and more and more weight, and they didn't redesign the nose gear. Things snapped like a pretzel. It snapped from. It didn't bend. It just snapped. This steel tube, which was an indication that it had been welded incorrectly. But that's experimental aviation, and that's why we all agree to this restriction. We all know that we're buying an airplane that has been built by a guy, and we just got one that just had some serious problems. And cosmetically, it was absolutely beautiful, and that's probably the danger because it just looked so good. But I found out during one of the annuals that the cable, there's a cable that retracts the mains, and it goes over pulleys. And I forget the number. But let's just say, for the sake of the argument, that it's supposed to pull 60 pounds of force to get the gear up. And this cable was off the pulley and was kind of rubbing against the mount of the pulley. And he did a test on it, and he said he was pulling almost 200 pounds of force, and it was still cranking the gear up. Anyway, enough about that. I don't want to give the whole show away, but does anybody know the backstory on the steely-eyed missile man term? Don't screw the pooch. I don't remember if they explained that in the right stuff. I don't really remember if it was in the movie. I'll just give you this too. Then I'll ask this big question I've been asking, and then I'll answer some questions. So the term "screw the pooch" is to make a mistake, and usually it means a bad mistake, but usually you would apply it to one that you could survive. And so the story goes like this, basically. So listen, Gus, don't screw the pooch, and what that means is, don't arrange to meet your girlfriend, park 2 miles away with the lights off. Make your way very silently through the weeds. Carefully pick the lock on the door. Gently walk up each one of those stairs. Glide past the bedroom where Dad is sleeping with the shotgun. And then go into the wrong room and screw the pooch. Anyway. It was just a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. So